Well, gosh, it was 18 degrees when I left my homestead to go on my little adventure today. And it's now, what? It feels so much hotter. Well, it's 21. But in the sunshine, it's hot, real hot. So, yeah, I'm wearing this little vest because it was cool, but now it's too much for me. Should have worn my cycling vest, but I didn't. Anyway, I need the pocket so I can whip out my camera and take little shots of the landscape. So this morning I did a piece about the Jomon and Yayoi cultures, ancient cultures of Japan. Yayoi believed to have crossed over from the Korean Peninsula into Japan at some point. I don't remember the dates. And the Jomon culture supposedly lasted for over 10,000 years, and they were settled hunter gatherers. So they lived in a place and they utilized nature around them sustainably. They didn't overhunt, they didn't shoot animals that were adolescent or young, and they only hunted older animals. And yeah, they were tied into the place, into the country, and they lasted a long, long time. And there's very little evidence that they had any war. Anyway, Eric Lee posted something and he referred to the Jomon, talking as he does about R and K culture. That's you have to wind back around to that, regardless of what he's focusing on at the moment. Uh, it's interesting. Sociologically, it's complex to think of it that way, but anyway, from an evolutionary standpoint, it's interesting. So I was thinking about the concept of Western culture, basically, um, well, cycling around. And it's, from this book I read, it's interesting to see, that, to realize, to know that, the whole concept of Western culture didn't really kick in, until after the American Revolution. It started to develop in the 15th century to a certain degree, and of course, people were aware of Roman and Greek culture for a long time, but it gradually uh, starts to become something uh, during the Middle Ages, and bit by bit, we're talking about Byzantium and the Ottoman Empire and other things like that. Bit by bit, it kind of, people start thinking in terms of Western civilization, but not really. There's no term for it. Once American exceptionalism or exceptionism uh, kicked in, or American supremacy, uh, then it's people started to lay claim to that narrative. Now, the Spanish colonialists also like to hearken back to Rome and think of themselves as, justifying their conquests in terms of the kind of Roman expansionism, Roman Empire, and so on. And today, all the neo-reactionary types, kids who are hip, they love to talk about Julius Caesar, and they like to talk about Rome and the Romans and all that kind of thing. It's very cool. You got to lay claim to that incredible heritage. But it wasn't a thing. Race wasn't a thing either. Racialization, happened bit by bit, but much, much later, uh, during the period of European colonialism and imperialism. They really didn't have much of a sense of race anywhere in the world. It was us and them. You had the insiders and then the barbarians. And that was basically all there was. They weren't really that concerned about skin color, although that's not totally true. In ancient times, people did notice such things and have stories about these differences, but it wasn't a big deal, not as much anyway. And you can pick that apart by looking, getting information from various scholars. But it really kicked in. All of it kicked in big time in the 16th century forward. During the Enlightenment, and then the 18th century educated Americans, and the Revolution, and then it kind of developed after that, and we're still hung up on it today, which is very weird. Regardless of all the information, the knowledge we have about everything, we're still hung up on race. It's so bloody weird. It's easy to imagine that, I like this football team and you like that football team, and when the other fans walk in the room, there's tension or whatever. Or, those people in France don't eat like us, or something like that. I don't like the weird Chinese food or something, but actually that's pretty normal. Insiders, outsiders, and the whole thing about culture is to create narratives like racial narratives. Why Irish people are like monkeys, and why this group or that group could never possibly write a poem or literature or something like that. It's pretty crazy, but we're still there with all that. Well, I've seen it in my life anyway for a long time. When I was in China, in and out for decades, I remember the narratives about how China could never catch up to the Americans and to the West, and now they've greatly surpassed America in many ways. Not in every way, obviously, but it doesn't matter. Comparing all the little details of who's better at this or that or the other thing. It's amazing the progress that they've made since 1980, and what they're doing is phenomenal. The other thing I wanted to say was, regardless of all of the progress that China has made, we're still in this polycrisis. We're still in overshoot. We're still in collapse. And collapse probably started thousands of years ago. It's been a slow process, and I'm talking about the collapse of civilization. But obviously, civilizations have had different characteristics over time, and ours is modern techno-industrial civilization. It's very unique. I think it's going to be very short-lived. So when we talk about how great China is and whether we should follow China, whether China is going to lead in the 21st century because America's on its way out, and it sure looks like it at the moment anyway, but everything favors the Asia, India and China and that whole region, which is why America wants to kill it and recolonize it, become the bosses, got to bring the Queen back to Hong Kong and so on, or the King now, the King. And anyway, regardless of all that progress, it's not going to last because of overshoot, because eventually we're not going to have the low-hanging fruit. China has a lot of coal, so they're going to be fine for quite a while, but the world still depends on diesel fuel and so on, and when that gets more expensive, all the economics is just so silly, because at the end of the day, we're cooking the planet, and these overshoot, all these different systems that we're wrecking and overshooting cannot be put back together again. When Humpty Dumpty falls, you can't piece it back together like a jigsaw puzzle. So we're going to have to deal with that, and that's going to greatly curtail growth in any respect. So all the big, huge wind turbines and all the maglev trains and all the beautiful airports and subways and whatever, they're going to not be running I don't think in 20 or 30 years. Um, of course, we can fantasize about other energy sources taking the place of, but I don't think that's going to happen. Um, and all, in terms of tokenization and stable coins and crypto and electronic currency or currency innovation, China can be right at the forefront of all that as well, because in the West it's just another Ponzi scheme or scam to greatly accelerate inequality. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Um, it's not for you, my friends. You could buy a Satoshi or something and hope that it goes up to billions of dollars or something. But at the end of the day, all of this is energy intensive, resource intensive, and the economics is just a game. It's a story. It's a construct, and it's developed to support big players, big investors in the global economy. So at the moment, China has a good place, and it can compete, but in the long run, no. So it's going to be rough for India and China at the end of the day. Even if they lead the world in green whatnots, you still need all of these materials and energies, inputs to develop and create and install and maintain these systems. So, yeah, tainter, overly complex systems tend to collapse eventually, and it's going to collapse. But this time it's not just the collapse of America or whatever. Europe's on its way out. Europe's over, and China and whatever. It's the collapse of the whole system and the structures of that system, and we'll just go back to doing things differently. So as I'm riding around here, people will be growing stuff and farming and trying to get by as the die-off continues, the starvation. But not for a while. So we can maintain our fantasies for a while longer. But I really believe that within 20 years, or at least a generation, everyone on the planet will become acutely aware of what overshoot and collapse is. And I don't know what they'll call it then, but it'll be very clear. But learning from Jomon or other indigenous cultures, how they lived, how they managed their way of life within their ecosystem, what a lot of people talk about as watershed and whatnot. Hunting, gathering, and gardening, basically. There'll be more technology, but just think about recycling all this stuff. If you can't open up copper mines and mine lead and so on, like they did in the olden days with lots and lots of slaves. If you go way back when, there weren't that many people on the planet. People were living in communities of 20 to 50 individuals. There wasn't a lot of labor to build the pyramids or to have a big copper mine so you can make weapons and whatnot. We'll go back to that kind of subsistence culture. And will it be bad or good? I don't know. You won't experience it, but I think the future generations will in one way or another. In the meantime, we'll just cook the planet. We'll talk about economic growth and different kinds of economic systems and different socioeconomic and political systems to replace the one we have now, or revolutions, or who's leading, blah blah blah. And it'll be fun. We'll watch the news and read the articles and the books, and it's all exciting. May you live in entertaining times. Interesting time. Times full of information and information technology and information delivery systems. But at the end of the day, the simplification, Nate Higgins didn't coin that term. Another person did before, but he uses it in his own way. That's fine. But simplification is simplification, and once you don't have access to certain technologies anymore or certain energy sources, You simplify. That's all you can do. And human beings are very adaptable. Uh, they'll figure out things. I mean, we figured out things all along for tens of thousands of years to come to this point, and we'll figure things out later. I don't know what's going to happen to all the nuclear power plants and nuclear waste and the poisons we put into the environment and nuclear bombs, and whether or not we're going to blow ourselves up. We'll find out. But I still think it's really interesting to study indigenous cultures and history. Go back 10, 20,000 years and take a look. You don't have to be paleo or caveman, but it would be good to know how to make a fire, even if you're just going to go camping, or what kind of things you can eat, for example. But we'll figure that out. You don't have to right now. You can go to Walmart and grocery store, so it's all good. We'll just watch my Netflix series, please. I mean, and buy me a coffee. Anyway, have the conversation. That's what we do. We're not going to do anything but have the conversation and audit the conversation. So enjoy that. And I'll talk to you later. William T. out. Aguas Pedras. I love it. Hello, old girl. What's up? How are you? You got some company? You got lots of flies on your face, kiddo. Lots and lots. Alcubasa, Alie Nazare. See? And then this huge park. See all that green? Goes on and on forever. That's a huge park. There's a bunch of small villages in there, but it just goes on and on forever. I've ridden my bike over there. You really need to plan it, because you're out in the middle of nowhere. But the coast is right along there, and there are lots of cool little towns where you can hang out. But look at that. Nothing but green. Adios, muchacha.